to the US presidential election, based on what we're saying. Well, welcome back. When did we last? Was it March? March, early March, when life was normal, when we could shake hands, when we could shake heads, when we could just nervously shake. Well, I do apologise, I was a little bit late today because I was just listening to the breaking news. I don't know whether you've heard it, that there will be a hard border enforced between the north and south side of Brisbane. We don't want any of those tops over here. So if you're not from the south side, I suggest you get back there fairly soon because there will be a hard border due to this. Thank you and welcome to the July version of the South East Brisbane Chamber of Commerce. We must get binoculars next time, Rebecca, so we can see each other at the table, where there's that far distance from each other. Just a reminder that there will be no handshakes, hugs, kisses or anything else, Auntie Marg, so just keep your hands off me today if you wouldn't mind. You don't pay, you don't touch, all right? Let's just remember that. Now, a few things. Craig will be coming around with a sheet where you can put your name and phone number, please. Nothing to do with COVID. Craig is newly single, so he would like some addresses for his book. Thank you. We will be selling raffle tickets. You have to rip your own off, Craig, or something like that?
No, I just lick it.
It's a COVID, just lick it and flick. Okay, this is a COVID-approved event. Was there something else I was supposed to say?
We're videoing?
Oh, we're videoing today, so if anybody else apart from myself is on the witness protection program, if you would like to make it aware that you don't want yourself recorded, then please let us know. Now, we believe in peaking early here at the South East Brisbane Chamber of Commerce. There will be no rivalling our next guest to perform Welcome to Country for the first time in 4 months. Would you please welcome to the front, Auntie Marg. We normally have introductory music for Auntie Marg, but we...
I'm just letting them know I've had a corona test and I haven't got it.
Oh.
And it's not going to come into my country and get me. You can just keep going where it came from. Yeah, saying that, when I came back from Canada, there were 3 plane loads full of Chinese people with masks on. That should have been a warning to Australia back in November. And they didn't let us know, did they? Anyway, for those who do not know me, I'm well known in the community as Auntie Margaret Lawton. I'm an Aboriginal elder and last month I turned 71. So I've got to retire soon. Even though people say you don't look it, I'm starting to feel it and the grey hairs are coming out now. So yeah, but anyway, I'm here to do the Welcome to Country. My name is Margaret Lawton and I'm a Mullanjali elder. Naval Mullanjali Dangalingalai. I'm here today to do the Welcome to Country, Gully Darlin, Illy Darlin Darlin, country where we meet today, Gully Darlin, Illy Darlin, Turrbal, Yugara and Yagara. I would like to acknowledge the First Nation traditional Aboriginal Turrbal, Yugara, Yagara people, custodians of the land where we gather here today and pay our respects to the elders both past and present and future, for they hold the memories and the tradition and the culture and the hopes of all Aboriginals Australia. Thank you and have a wonderful day, and thank you.
Thank you, Auntie Marg. Well done. Now, just before I introduce the President for some ruling words, I'd like to acknowledge Dr. Tony Watt, who's here today. Thank you, Tony, for coming along. Tony is the culture doctor. That is nothing to do with any cultures to do with COVID, of course, Tony, is it? So we welcome you and look forward to hearing from you today. For those of you wondering about schools, the only reason they're not here is because they're all lazily lying in bed, enjoying their second or third and final week of the school holidays. Anyway, if I could take the opportunity now to welcome to the front a President who has even greater control over the Chamber than Vladimir Putin does over Russia now. She is destined to be the President here until she turns 87 years old. Would you please welcome the President of the South East Brisbane Chamber of Commerce, Rebecca Llewellyn.
87, that's very specific. Thank you. Good morning, welcome. It is lovely to be back with everybody. It's so nice to see people in real life again, I don't know about you, but I was very Zoom fatigued by the end of COVID. I could not take another large Zoom meeting. I just wanted to kind of meet and see people again. So I'm really thrilled and happy to be back. I hope people enjoyed or learnt some lessons through COVID. I think never let a good crisis go wasted. So there's definitely been, for a lot of businesses that I know that we work with and that I've been speaking to, people have found new ways of doing things. People have found, more profitable ways of doing things. Maybe not necessarily the revenue was coming in, but certainly they've been able to improve profitability by doing things differently. It's been great to watch how local businesses have completely shifted to online offerings and really making the most of what's been going on. And what's also been really interesting is seeing how much local community has really got into supporting local business as well. I think that's wonderful, and I really do hope that continues, and that sort of, talking to business owners down on Oxford Street and other little precincts, people feeling very buoyant right now, which is great, which is really wonderful. I'd like to acknowledge CCIQ's work over the last 4 months, particularly with regards to advocating on behalf of small business. They've done an exceptional job, really been on the front foot, particularly around, with JobKeeper, with putting pressure on the government to let us know when the borders were opening. And whilst I'm quite happy to see that we're putting a hard line around Victoria for the moment, it's definitely good for our, accommodation, local businesses, that we're getting some more, we will have some more of that interstate, not international yet, but interstate travel happening again, which will be great. Who gets 3 weeks holiday this time? Do your kids get 3 weeks holiday?
Yeah, there's schools where you get to pay an inordinate amount of money.
Ah, great. So,
Part of the privilege of that is you get an extra
you
week
get an extra week's holiday.
with the terrorists.
That's amazing. Oh gosh, thank God. So my kids are at state school, so we've just come back from a week just up on at Sunshine Coast camping, and it was really great to see. Last year when we went, this campsite was quite quiet, I would say. Quiet, yes, quiet. But this year, with obviously, with people not being able to travel interstate and having to kind of stay local, it was full that first week, and it was, talking to the owners, they were thrilled. They were really excited to be open again. Like there's a lot of positive emotion right now. I think people are feeling really great. So hopefully, what we can take from this is we've got some measures now in place, and we've built some resiliency, because if we take the approach that there is going to be likely a second wave, obviously we hope for the best but prepare for the worst. Hopefully we can have things in place so that when things like JobKeeper finish up, we don't have to resort to draconian measures of complete lockdown. We can come up with sensible, pragmatic ways that business can still operate, because the cost of having businesses completely shut down again will be far greater than just an economic cost. There will be a lot of social costs going on that we really, I think as a community, if we can find ways to really just act appropriately and make sure that we can support our local businesses to continue to trade through any second waves, then I think that would be wonderful. And that's certainly conversations I'll be having with Di and Cara and our local members. Other than that, this morning normally we would have a business of the month, but what I thought we'd do instead is, has anyone got business cards with them today? Yes? Great, because I totally didn't bring any business cards with me. But what I thought we would do, and we'll do it, I'll wander myself around, but I'll grab one of the buckets, just pop your business cards in. I thought we could just do a random coffee catch-up kind of a deal. So go support a local business, go out, go meet one of the local members, sit down, have a coffee, just connect and build community. I think, it's been a long time since we've been able to sit down and chat to each other face to face. So take the opportunity this next month to just meet someone new, go sit down, find out about what they do, what you do, and not necessarily just business, but community stuff as well. How are you involved, what do you like to do? All right, so thank you very much for being here. It's lovely to see you all again, and we look forward to having a wonderful chamber event again over the next few months, and hopefully we can continue through the rest of the year. So thanks for being here.
All right, I think we're going to have a bit of breakfast, folks. Enjoy a bit of a chat, and we'll be back with Tony soon.
Can I not hear my voice? Repeat it back to me, thanks. my head.
You're about to gear up. Every room has a kitchen. Yes.
It's been about 6 or 7 weeks full time. But even now, 2 days a week. Which I sort of said,
Oh yeah, that's all right.
bags.
I like you check it first.
Oh, working from home. She said,
Oh, yeah, it's right there. I've got it over here, thanks. I've got it. She's looking through that.
brewery, yeah, I was about to say, no, I'm good. Yep.
Thank you, Jane.
It's still there, it's just claim to fame, it's busy, property side is busy, and still run commercial land.
Yes, I can imagine that's
That's building a business that's all put together and yarn or whatever.
Does everyone have a meal?
They've developed a beer.
Is everyone eating or are we short one meal?
It's the Rudd beer.
No, it's
Beer. My husband's birthday's coming up. I thought I'd give a couple or whatever. Contact me. She can only have it.
Oh, thank you.
So it's worth a drive out to Melbourne.
Good morning. Would anyone like raffle tickets? Has anyone not signed into the currency?
Good job.
Oh,
No, that's morning for Mrs. Cutcher. There's no one over here. I'll go for it. Give me an extras. Thank you.
They've got to use the basement. Two or three little rooms. Which is very basic. So accommodation. Somewhere to go on the weekend. Enjoy the beer and the food.
Sorry? How long you got? Why not? Good morning. I'm selling raffle tickets if anyone doesn't have them. We've got FPOS and I've got the currency sign in if you have your sign or phone number.
Cutting too hard.
It's hard when the alarm went off at 6 a.m. It's actually legal for Linden to be president 3 times.
4 degrees at Westlake, where I came from.
Well, not that I'm aware of.
Not even my club.
We're such a small club. Everyone gets to go, and like in 10 years, everyone's going to turn. And like, I did it 3 years, probably about 6 years ago. And the only good thing, and we had this
one by one.
discussion, we went, you know, look, we are small. One of us has to be president. But everyone does everything anyway. It's not like anyone has a specific role. You know, everyone just does it. And so really, it's only a big sort of decision. Glenda said, well, I always felt that I got a little bit more benefit out of being president, having 2 years. He said, how did you feel about 3 years? I said, it's a bit of a blur. I really, like, I don't know how I ended up being there for 3 years, but I did, and it was just, but you're on a mission and no one got in your road. Because you get started on things. And he said, well, I'd like to do 3 years. He said, well, I think it'd be really good to, because he said, I'd like to work on the articles. And I said, but you could do that anyway. He said, well, look, I'd really like to push this freaking plan through. And I said, go ahead. And we all just like, see the dream.
A lot of time on it's quite inspirational work they're doing, including building the centre out of Purpose Creek.
You put aside when life gets in the road.
No, it was 7
Yes, the 8th habit was find your voice and help others to find theirs.
So it's been, yes, yeah, well, I mean, I was actually years on working.
There's no shortage of people who are spouting
No, I don't like those ones. I haven't ever seen.
necessarily backed up.
First week of things was,
I was saying to the other guy, the people who are trying to something
Building the industry with apprentices, they would treat people as an apprentice, so I would treat my apprentices with child abuse.
Yeah, well, apparently the IT guys.
Well, we're really no change. We didn't, really didn't,
Just don't let your own, it's yours.
I suppose, have a lot of impact. We've had a
Other
change.
voices in your head.
But, yeah, we never stopped. Never stopped. Well, we didn't have any restriction other than 1.5 because we do education. It's almost like you exempt. Alright, because the moment you step into the classroom, it's impossible to guarantee 1.4, 1.5 metres. But if you spread everyone out to 1.5, what we did is we went, okay, look, what we'd like you to do is elect 2 days of a 5 day. So the teacher's still there 5 days a week. But what we want you to do as a student, we want you to all select 2 days, half days. And so every student got then an opportunity to come 2 half days.
Hasn't that been a boom business?
And we tried to map them so that there was never any more than 4 people in the room. And then what we did then is and with distance learning. So they of course, most of the people that I deal with wouldn't survive in an they didn't have to. They had a paper trail. They felt supported. They had personal contacts. Most of them survived, and they survived on hydrodynamics, and they still have it. So we were able to maintain, although it was fragmented, it was structured, and we didn't have a problem. Not a problem. We just did that across the entire country. And we decided, we had no no one could be like us. We had a lot of problems trying to present it. But everybody did, like, you know, we just went straight to bleach and water. And as it turned out, that tended to be the survival of it all. And all the students had to do their best before and after. It was just part of the site. Everyone had to take part pretty quickly. I've got to clean, doubled our cleaning for the site, but I said, that's not going to fix it. I said, you must take control of the homework. So I said, everything is in the room, every classroom has it. You must do this, you know, because this is your protection. This isn't my protection. This is your protection. So I tried to run that through. We had signs and crap up everywhere. But basically, I suppose we just learned as we saw what we could do. And like we didn't get a choice. We got directives from the government that actually said, you will not stop. And we went, no. Whereas I had other people in my same thing, and they just, as soon as it just shut the door, and all the staff told to go home. And all of my life just never even stopped. I mean, we've gone to 4 days a week because financial, because we do a lot with mutual obligations, so so all of our work in the dole processes stopped immediately. So no one and like we would have to lay all my stuff off. So we were able to maintain all that stuff to restrict time, but at least they got the code rules running. And then we did a lot of
eventually
jobs,
around the clock,
sort of like the job networking sort of stuff. Washes and so on. They only this work because they have to, not because they want to, and they have the option not to because they did. So there is no income at all. So some of the programs where the referral process comes from the job networks or that just switched off. It just and like that was financial. So that's sort of 60%. I grew up as a kid in the West. Yeah, so it was always I was thinking it was always like a spike, and that's it. We just eliminate it. And luckily enough, we own 7 of our buildings, so I was just going to walk out of all the other buildings. And that was my plan. But when they said that they help organisations, we were able to go, okay. And then, of course, we were still paying staff 5 days a week at that stage. So right up until we, sort of made a decision, we would have probably run out of money about the end of this month. So and I just said to him, I just used to put out a weekly, this is where we're at, and people will be asking these strange, I'll be getting emails, all these bloody questions. That was the greatest nightmare of my life. I actually felt like I should have because staff asking stupid questions when we, I suppose in the past, because I've done this for 40 years, everything up until that point, I had recipe knowledge.
And they can make an introduction.
No knowledge of that, and no one had knowledge. So you couldn't go and get it. It was, what do they mean by that? Oh, and then you ask the person that created that thought, and they go, we don't know what we mean. What are you going to say? Well, the government put out something, and then they explain it, and you go, that's not what it's meant. 400 people, all were down a path, quite different to what you think. But time fixed it.
So how does the end of September then, when the JobKeeper process?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, we would still stay on restricted hours. I think we will. The greatest, we're waiting for the switch to go back on. When they actually say to all the job seekers that you must return to your activities, then all of our clients will come back, all of our income will come back. But if they don't do that, then we're sort of Well, I think it's because there's not enough central stuff. So when they switched it off for the
When you're ready.
they switched it off
All right.
across the entire.
Well, I hope everybody enjoyed their breakfast.
Should have been done.
After more than 3 decades leading large teams of people during a successful career in the education sector, Tony launched the Culture Doctor. Tony's work as an organisational culture consultant, because that was too much for me this morning, Tony, and business coach sees him liaise closely with senior executives across many industries. Tony has successfully delivered change management programs to scores of businesses, including local government bodies, professional services firms, including engineers, environmental scientists and architects, as well as blue-collar businesses, an abattoir and a timber yard are amongst his many clients. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome Dr. Tony Watt.
Thank you very much, David, for your welcome, and Rebecca, thank you very much for the invitation. I've enjoyed our time discussing some mutual interests, including my old high school, where we have a connection. So, the topic that I've chosen for today has been drawn from the famous quote from Warren Buffett. And Warren Buffett's quote was, when the tide goes out, we find out who's been swimming naked. And the tide has gone out. Business conditions have changed dramatically. And we're talking about a new normal. What does it all mean for us? And some of us are being sorely tested on who we say we are for our people of our organisation and for our customers. Some customers are finding out in tough times that the company that we were connected with isn't possibly the company I thought they were, particularly when we've needed support and so on. So I thought this was an appropriate topic for us to start on. So let's talk about culture. It's my inch wide, mile deep. Over our next 20 minutes, and we've allocated 10 minutes for questions afterwards. I want to talk about what culture is, and most definitely what it isn't, and what you must do about taking control of your own organisational culture. It's actually quite simple, or at least I've tried to take some complex ideas and render them very simply. So let's make a start. I like to turn to a little bit of comedy first, and thought you might enjoy having a listen to what one of the great commentators with tongue-in-cheek says about culture. Gilbert, you can read that for yourself, I'm sure. I can assure you that culture is not about the cake. It most definitely isn't about the cake. And yet, you know, it's this nonsense that does go on in businesses that turn serious-minded business people like you off having anything to do with culture. If it's about this sort of nonsense, if that's what getting a culture right is about, this sort of nonsense, people like you say, I don't want to have anything to do with it. That's airhead stuff. And it really is. That's why, of course, it's so beautifully mocked by Dilbert. Great fan of Dilbert. So Alice and pointy-haired boss had an interesting exchange. She wanted to get on with doing some serious work. So I thought I would bring to you a very recent study of 1,500 leaders like you in small to medium enterprises, and they were asked a couple of profound questions about culture. So to the question of is culture a top organisational priority and critical to the company's performance. Critical to the company's performance. What percent do you think of those 1,500 said they strongly agreed that it was critical to the performance? Just have a brief guess with your table there. Interaction. What percent do you think said they strongly agreed that it was critical to the performance?
I love being here with detail. 50%.
The correct answer is all of them should have, something less than all of them said yes.
No, I reckon they all said yes. Oh, I reckon there's another one that said.
So the answer is 60%. 60%. And as I overheard a couple of tables, this is just the strongly agreed. No doubt if we add the agreed and the rest of it, there was a pretty overwhelming number there. So the sense is that we get it that culture is really important. And I'm going to make the case for you as to just how important it is. Let me though take you to an even more startling statistic that came out of that same survey. When the question was asked, how many are satisfied with the strength of their own company culture? What do you think that percentage was? Of the 1,500 leaders of small to medium enterprises who were surveyed, what percentage said they were satisfied with their own culture?
100%.
Strength of their own, 100%.
20. They don't want to recognise that there's a problem.
10. Okay, so David almost wins the gold watch and chain
Oh,
because it was a mere 11%. So that's, if I was to take that into this room, would say 1 in every 10 people. So there are only 2 people in this room who are satisfied, if I could extrapolate that statistic, who are satisfied with the strength of their own company culture. That's what I call swimming naked. I'll make the case further. But if that statistic is true, that there's only 2 people in this room satisfied, and they're possibly deluded anyway.
You might be satisfied with what I was going to say.
So, does anyone recognise that famous face? That's Peter Drucker, the so-called father of modern management. He had something to say about that survey. He strongly agrees because he said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Now, it's often misunderstood. In fact, his whole quote was, culture eats strategy for breakfast, organisational excellence for lunch, and everything else for dinner. Why did he say that? Was he saying strategy isn't important? Hell no, strategy is very important. But he said, if you get your strategy right and your culture is RS, you're scaffolding strategy on shifting sands. You've got to have a dependable culture. You've got to know what it is and know it accurately. He had something else to say also. This powerful comment, and it's debated by some, those who want to go into the airy-fairy stuff and say, oh, some of this important stuff, you can't put a number around it, and that might be true. But Peter Drucker said, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Because if you can't measure it, you just don't know where it's at. There's no metric, there's no line of vision on it. There are only claims, hollow claims. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And I'm going to draw on that strongly. So here's the issue. Why would you bother trying to measure culture? What's the point of all this culture stuff anyway? Why would you even be concerned about getting a culture right? Where's it lead? This guy understood it. This figure from history understood the importance of getting culture right, although he didn't have the word culture to put around it. But he said you can't, and it was in the sexist language of the time because most of the soldiers were men, you can't buy a man's life, but he'll give it to you for a medal. In fact, Napoleon said, I would have conquered the whole world if I could have bought enough ribbon. Isn't that a beautiful saying? He understood the nature of men, fickle that we are. That it's amazing, he said, how hard and how long a soldier will fight for a little piece of ribbon. He understood what motivated people and how to motivate them. It's a powerful statement. And you know, what he was looking for, what he obtained for his army was the competitive advantage that you should be seeking for your business. We're after the competitive advantage. We're in a competitive environment. And the competitive advantage and the point of culture is this. This is my message for the day. It's about getting the gift that your staff turn up. And you, if you work for others, that you turn up with every day of your working life. This gift, and you usually take it back home with you. It's called discretionary effort. It's called discretionary because you've got the complete discretion over whether you give the gift or you take it with you. And if you get your culture right, the companies with the best cultures get loads of discretionary effort. The boss doesn't have to pay for it. You can't buy it, you can't will it, you can't demand it. It's given as a gift. Discretionary effort. It's where you are as happy as mustard to turn up at work every day and you just love what you're doing because the environment is great. So the point about culture is discretionary effort. It has no other meaning. There's no other reason for it. And very few talk about discretionary effort. I'm going to make that case. Now, there are two cultures at work. One's real and one's aspirational. The sad thing, the fatal flaw, is that leaders misunderstand the difference between their aspirational culture and their real culture. And guess what? They masquerade the real culture as their aspirational culture, and they couldn't be further apart. Most shiny signs at the front of the office, most lovely words written on websites are aspirational. The real culture is another beast altogether, and a dangerous beast. And I'll make the case about those. So just want you to say, and I want you to take away from this, that if you are masquerading your aspirational culture as real culture, you're swimming naked and the tide's gone out, you're going to be found out. I'll show you some scary stories. Because that delusion is a wise man's hell. That delusion is a wise man's hell, mixing up an aspirational culture with the real culture. So let me show you a couple of celebrated naked swimmers. This is poor old Jeffrey Skilling, a CEO of Enron Corporation, $101 billion company, the seventh largest energy or company out of Texas, in an energy company that went bankrupt. 4 years before they went bankrupt, they lost $70 billion. They were the mum and dad investors from across America who went to the wall with these guys because their numbers were sustained by systematic fraud. Arthur Andersen, who was the fourth largest accounting advisory in the world, went to its grave because they were found to be duplicitous in this fraud. So they're swimming naked. Let me show you what I call shiny brass plaque syndrome, suffered by most leaders. This was their brass plaque, rather tarnished now. Of course, Enron doesn't exist anymore. They went to the wall, bankrupt in 2001. It was the largest corporate collapse in America. Oh, but there were plenty more that followed. And I'll tell you just another one of them. They had integrity as one of their values. That was the aspirational, or that was the hoodwinking of the public to say, you can trust us, you can put your money with us because we believe in respect and integrity and the American way, and so on the blah blah goes. So I've called this shiny brass plaque syndrome. They had 22,000 employees. They had the best consultants that money could buy. They did engagement surveys until they fell off the cliff. They did engagement surveys that said our staff are highly engaged, what a wonderful company. Oh, and it went worse, didn't it? Do you remember the global financial crisis? This was Lehman Brothers, the great investment company. That's what greed looks like. They didn't put on their shiny brass plaque, one of our values is greed, but that's what their real culture was. And when it all went south in that short period of time, they disappeared to oblivion. That's Lehman Brothers. That was at the time then, that was an even bigger corporate collapse than Enron. And it triggered the global financial crisis. But we need not just throw stones at our American cousins. We haven't too much to be proud of in our own country. We've just come through the Hayne Royal Commission into the financial sector. And I'm sure there are going to be some executives go to jail over some of the things that we've said have been corporate crime, white-collar crime. And in fact, Hayne said, and he channels, if you like, what Drucker was saying. And Hayne gets it slightly wrong, because even the Royal Commissioner didn't completely understand about culture. But he said that the behaviours and the outcomes, so behaviours and outcome, that's the second big clue for this morning. The behaviours and outcomes that culture drives. It's actually not culture, it's values and beliefs drive, because culture's the whole package. But let's go with Hayne anyway. He said, can and should be measured. He actually says, when he's investigated, pull the cover back on these very powerful, well-resourced financial sector companies, the biggest on our own Australian stock market. He said that we pulled the covers back and found out that they aren't what they say they are. And in fact, the behaviours that we've found, greed and fraud and misrepresenting the books and so on, it's commonplace. No wonder the federal government resisted it for so long, holding the Royal Commission. And so let's have a look at the dear old Commonwealth Bank, just to pick on the biggest one. And I could have picked anyone. They say that there was a $1.2 billion cost associated with the uncoverings by the Royal Commission into the findings. And of course, the massive cost of winning back trust, the loss of trust, that's what happened. The one thing we all want with clients and customers and staff are high levels of trust, a high trust environment. And there's a massive cost, much bigger, the $1.2 billion loss, which is in financial terms. That's the thing that we need to be very concerned about. But I just want to spend a moment and have a look at their core values that they had at the time of from their website. There they are again, the shiny brass plaque syndrome. Write them up on a fancy board and it shall be so. It was anything but integrity, collaboration, excellence, accountability and service. Failed on all 5 of them, and that's the core of who they said they were. And look, they've learnt nothing. In 2020, I've just taken it off their website. They've just played with the words integrity now is we do what is right. Now that's fine, that's lovely, but back to the wise man's hell. How do you know? If you're not measuring it, how do you know? But hey, culture's this fluffy thing, this airy-fairy thing, you can't measure it. That's the myth in business. That's what we say, you can't measure culture. Well, I say you're wrong. You can measure culture and it can be measured very easily, and I'm going to give you some clues to that in the couple of minutes that remain. So the massive cost there. Commonwealth Bank is still swimming naked and the tide has gone out. They're still swimming naked. It's being wallpapered over with some fancy words and some schmeck advertising campaign, but there's no measure on who they say they are. They're swimming naked. Now, you've got a choice with your own company. You can have a culture by default, and you've got that right now. You've got that right now. Every organisation of one person, starting with one person and greater, has a culture. Your customers know it, your competitors know it. There's something about the nature of your company that we call culture, about its values, what it stands for, and how it behaves, as Hayne, the Royal Commissioner, was saying. So, if you ask people what is culture, most things, and universities say, most people say, oh, it's the way we behave around here. I think it was Lewis Carroll who said, it's the way we behave when no one's looking, when no one's watching. But that's only half right, because Simon Sinek's been telling us about starting with why. You need to start with why, which is at the essence of who you are. So, the why we do things around here, or the way we do things around here, that's the big debate in culture. In fact, they're both right, they're both half right. Put them together and you get close to exactly what culture is. This is what I'm advocating. You should take charge of your culture, and it should be one by design. That is your aspirational culture, and you should be actively working at it. So let me give you a simple metaphor. When someone talks about culture, I want you to just think of an iceberg. I've got a fancy diagram that I did as part of my doctoral work, and I use it as a cure for insomnia these days. If someone can't sleep, I say, here, take this chart to bed with you, gaze at it for 5 minutes, I guarantee you'll fall asleep. This is a simple way to understand culture. Culture is the iceberg, the whole of the iceberg. And it's got a number of components on that. I'm just going to skim over the top of them for today. Values. We've got to be talking about values. And there's a science around values. It's called axiology. And the second one is beliefs. And you see I'm mapping them in the deepest part of the iceberg, where it was formed up in the mountains a couple of thousand years ago. You can drill into it. We can tell what the weather was like at the time of Christ by drilling into the depths of the formation of the iceberg. And that's where I map values and beliefs. Both topics have to be thought about with culture. And this is the one Hayne was talking about. At the very visible part of the iceberg, behaviours. And I'll go to why I've mapped it there. Now, there's the why of culture. It's the beliefs and values. That's where why sits. You'll notice something about that, why the iceberg is important, because the popular definition of the way of culture is the bit above the waterline. The bit that sunk the Titanic wasn't the bit above the waterline. They saw that bit, and as they steered too late, it was the bit under the water, the big hidden bit, massively bigger than the bit you can see that ripped the bottom out of the Titanic and set it to its watery grave. So I want to just go further into the metaphor and say to you, the reason the iceberg is so important is that there's a margin, and it's the margin between the visible, the above the waterline, and the invisible, the bit below the waterline. And so we say, in fact, that this bit, beliefs and values, are in our private subjectivity, to use the language. You can't see someone's values, you can't see their beliefs. That's usually why people say you can't measure culture. You can't see values, you can't see beliefs. There's 128 formal values, there are thousands of beliefs. And I could give you a range of topics here. We could start with COVID-19, and there'd be 15 different beliefs around COVID-19. Some of them be similar, some of them be very personal, and so on. But when we produce our cognition, it's published. Behaviours are a publication of what's going on inside our heads. All of our behaviours, your body language. Look at your publication you made this morning. When you got up, you went to the wardrobe, you dressed in a particular way. Some people decide they're going to have a beard. Some people don't have a choice about whether they've got hair on the top of their head, but for most of us, when we take a particular hairstyle, go to the barber, we're publishing meaning without remedy all of the time. We are publishing. Our cognition is being published, and it becomes visible. So this is the clue as to why this is a great metaphor for culture. Let me take you to a couple of quick final concepts. We hear a lot about engagement surveys. This is a shallow measure of culture, and most companies are doing it in the world. For the last 30 years, it's been all about engagement surveys, and there are a fair amount of nonsense in it, quite frankly, because it's not measuring what it's supposed to be measuring. What we should be focusing on are alignment, aligning the behaviours of your organisation with the values of the organisation, if you don't want to swim naked. So it should be about alignment surveys, finding out the alignment between how your company is behaving against the values that you profess. So here's where you start. This is a company I'm working with at the moment. And the starting point is to say, what are my make or break values? What are the values of the organisation that you've breathed into existence? Whoever owns the company owns the values, and they need to be stated. Now, a lot of people only go that far and put that stuff up. That's where you get your Enrons and your Commonwealth banks with their fancy words. But it's got to be what you believe are the things that if you get them right, it'll make your company, and if you get it wrong, it'll break your company. That's why I call them make or break values. These are fantastic. They're very sincere, working with the owner, and he believes deeply in these things. He wants to get those right with his people. And so the starting point then is to be able to benchmark your cultural health. And two famous American professors, Cotter and Hesketh, established without a doubt with longitudinal studies that increasing productivity is a function of cultural health. The higher the cultural health, then the higher the productivity, because you're getting into discretionary effort. Remember, we started with discretionary effort. So this is just a framework that I map, benchmark where the company is according to their values and the behaviours, as measured by their staff, the beliefs of their staff. I don't chase a rational model, which are engagement surveys. They're a rational model. Humans aren't rational. We'd still have Julia Gillard as our Prime Minister, and we'd have a carbon exchange scheme running in the country if rationality and science carried the day. Tony Abbott smacked it out of the water because he got in touch with the fears and the beliefs of the Australian public, at least somewhere around 50% of them, enough to be able to roll someone who had all the science behind it. Humans aren't rational, so rational measures never cut the mustard. You've got to get into the beliefs of your people, and that's reality, what the people believe about your organisation. And great companies are believed into action. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So, are you interested in benchmarking your real culture, or are you just wanting to keep swimming naked and hoping no one will notice a difference when the tide goes out? So, let's continue our conversation and see what questions you've got.
Let me ask one first. Okay, you go.
I've worked in many organisations, and I work with some very large ones and some very small ones. Now, I see a lot of zebra stripes, and as much I keep painting them and turning them into a white horse, the zebra stripes come back. So I keep struggling with the idea that the only way I fix this problem is a pile of crucifixions and remove them from the organisation. I don't often see people's behaviour modified. I see it hidden, but I don't see it modified. How do we fix that?
So, my experience is the problems often rest with the leadership and the boss.
That's where the zebras are.
That's where the shiny brass plaque stuff is at work, and most effective change, all effective change has to be led from the top. So when I come into an organisation, they say, I'll hand you over to the HR department. I say, I'm not interested in the gig. Unless you as a leader are prepared to be in the trenches with your team on this and show that you are committed to cultural change, it ain't going to work. You'll get compliance, which is what the engagement surveys often do. You can get compliance. We saw what happened with the Fitzgerald inquiry into the Queensland Police Service. When the outgoing Commissioner Atkinson left, he said the old culture is still just there below the surface. We have to be eternally vigilant, or it will appear again, and so on. So cultural change as against compliance. One of the American presidents said some time ago, if you get them by the short and curlies, the hearts and minds are sure to follow. That's compliance. You know, if you can jail people and you punish people, you'll get compliance. But like the Russians found after Lenin, with 100 years of killing people in large numbers, the Christian church was just below the surface, and under perestroika, Christian church has come out in Russia stronger than ever was. So cultural change is very different from cultural compliance or behavioural compliance. Change is something that's very deep and stout and resilient, if we get in touch with true values and true behaviours.
I'm going to throw the boss out. I'm going to pick the subordinates that have been fostering the behaviour, the ideals that they've been creating, except Commonwealth Bank for those. So I'm not just getting rid of the boss, I'm getting rid of the key executives of the organisation as well.
Could be, or they need to change, but sometimes...
I don't see change happening.
Yeah, well, it's a powerful observation. I can't argue with you.
So, Tony, do you think an organisation that maybe has a successful culture and it goes through generational change, does the culture need to change to suit the generation?
Beautiful question. Beautiful question. It's a profound question, if I may say so. I always say when I go into an organisation, who owns the values? And they say, oh, my grandfather wrote that. I said, oh, could I meet your grandfather? Oh no, he died 20 years ago. Well, if he died and they're his values, who owns them now? Oh, and the son who's got the company says, oh, I don't agree with them. I said, well, how can you expect anyone in the company to agree with them? What are your values? You own the company. The idea of owning a company is you say, I believe profoundly in this stuff and I'm going to recruit people who also believe in it. If you get that, there's alignment and you get discretionary effort. People love working there. Rather than, oh God, work again today. I walked through Queen Street Mall when we used to be allowed to, and in the mornings early, all these people going to work, they're not happy. It's time serving. But these companies that have got great cultures that are getting the discretionary effort from their people are joyful. They turn up before the doors open, they want to be there. They're there after work because there's something deep inside them they're satisfied because they're perfectly aligned. That's the hard bit, finding what this alignment is. It starts with getting the value statement right and authentic. Not going up into the mountains with the expensive consultant and struggling back with the tablets of stone and saying, let's bolt these up on the wall and everyone will colour, because the staff, when they walk in and they know it ain't true, the staff go, to you boss, and to you corporate culture. And disgruntled clients who aren't finding integrity spit on it on the way in. And you'll get mocked by your clients when it goes wrong. That's why this stuff has to be so authentic. If it's not authentic, it won't last. Shiny brass plaque syndrome. What's that burning question you'd like to ask? Please do.
I'm interested to know whether or not you've seen organisations where they have a head office that has a very different culture than a state-based culture. And look, obviously you can't pull all the levers at a head office environment when you're state-based, so you've seen my circumstance. But you really want to create an amazing culture at a state-based level. Have you seen that be successful, and what ways would you recommend starting that process?
Well, it's again another profound question because it is at the heart of the stuff we've got to get right. The company has a set of values and they apply all over the place. I dealt with one of my clients was Tate & Lyle, listed on the London Stock Exchange. They're a food additive company, a huge company. And the culture in their Hong Kong base or their Chinese branch is very different from Melbourne. Melbourne's very different from Brisbane, but they've got the same, what they call 3 core values and 5 performance values, whatever the hell that means, but they had 8 values. I don't think you should have any more than 5 values in the company, because you can't even know. Most bosses, when I say, tell me what your company values are, oh, let me go and look it up. I think, my God, that's living in the company and you're the boss. They've got to be top of mind, they've got to be known, but they can be expressed differently. So it's the behaviours, that bit of the iceberg, the bit that's making it all work hangs in there. They don't change, same values all over the world for that company, but they can be expressed differently. Where it goes wrong is where the branch says we don't believe in those values, we've got a different set of values. I say keep the same values, just interpret them into behaviours for your branch, what they mean, and believe in those things, and you're delivering them. So I say the boss owns the bit under the water, and the team members own the bit above. It's called, some call them a conduct code, but you're getting that alignment by doing those 2 things.
Thank you.
You'll stop me when you've my 20 minutes.
I run a number of not-for-profits, and the very difficult thing is giving everyone a very easy recipe for decision making, because people are very autonomous and need to be, I suppose, feel like they're in control and can make decisions. And so someone many years ago said to me, it must survive the Courier Mail test. Now I know the Courier Mail doesn't go out to everyone as it did, but it still is a very important way to explain to my staff. I say, if you wouldn't want your mother to read this about you making this decision poorly in the Courier Mail tomorrow, of course it would be Facebook, Twitter and whatever else now, then don't do it.
But the point is, you do want to make the front page of the Courier Mail for the right reasons, and that's because you are behaving your values to such a point, it's a good news story every time. So what you're saying is stay true to the company. You don't get caught out for fraud and greed and the rest of it, because see, the thing about engagement and alignment, Commonwealth Bank employees were highly engaged, but they were engaged with evil. It's still high engagement. Engagement surveys say, yeah, you can be engaged, but with greed and evil and so on. But if you're aligned with your values, it excretes the greed. It gets rid of those evils and so on that bring companies down. That's why the values have got to be make or break values, and they've got to be lived out authentically in the behaviours of the organisation, the bit above the water. That's what culture's about. So you're right, you don't want to make the front page of the Courier Mail for the wrong reasons. And the reason you'll do that is because you're betraying your values, or your professed values. The aspirational culture.
Yeah.
But the real culture lurks, as Steve Simpson does in his unwritten ground rules. He says when you join a company, forget about the published policies, the shiny brass plaque, work out the unwritten ground rules if you want to survive. But the unwritten ground rules can be evil. It can be damaging and destroying. It can be bullying. You go into hospitals, the stories about surgeons bullying other staff, junior staff. You go into, we're talking about law firms where it's hell sometimes for young lawyers coming and joining work conditions. You go into tradies and so on with apprentices, the way some terrible behaviours. Well, I was treated that way when I was apprentice, so they're damn well going to get it from me. It's the culture. Well, it's a bad culture. It's a terrible culture. It doesn't make it right because everyone did it. So it is that Courier Mail test. Absolutely, agree with you. I'm waiting for you to wrap me up.
Yeah, one more question, Judith. The orange.
We actually use the words unwritten ground rules in a culture changing activity we participated in. And I wonder how much that naming the elephant in the room of saying these are what we know are our unwritten rules, how much that can action that change of heart when people actually swim nakedly for a while perhaps.
Yes. Absolutely. In fact, the exercise that I use in getting up the measure, the metric, is about naming what perfection looks like and naming what toxic looks like and scoring on that continuum in 25 measures that's developed by the staff. So the unwritten ground rules don't make them right. That's why I say Steve Simpson is only half right when he says the way we behave around here. That might describe the real culture, but the aspirational culture is driven by the aspirational culture is driven very much by the values of the organisation. So we're out of time. Please contact me if you're determined to take control of the culture of your company. I work with very small and very large organisations, and the important thing is that you earn some discretionary effort from your team. You'll be found out if you go back into the water naked. Thanks, everyone.
I'm getting it.
Yes, you're good. Thank you.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, Tony. Did we have time? Well, thank you very much, Tony. We were just having a mumble conversation there, but thank you very much for coming. That was terrific. I had often sort of given thought to doing a bit of skinny dipping, but it appears that that's not going to be a viable activity in the future. Now, do we have...
Just not with your team.
Just not with the team, yes.
In the dark.
Yes. It's gone all out the legal profession, hasn't it? The old associates of High Court judges. It's a bit unfortunate. Anyway, we'll move on from that. Raffles.
Craig? Raffle?
I think we've got a bit of a culture problem here. When I say
Just
raffles, everybody jumps, all right?
What we did.
Funny you run a number of not-for-profits. I think I run a number of not-for-profits too, even though I wanted them to be profits. But that's a bit of a bummer. All right, lucky door prize, courtesy of Brendan of the Combsley Hotel, where we thou sit our bottoms.
Tony? You could be responsible for...
Just nice as I
Oh, we don't mind.
No,
Paul. Paul.
that's all right. You draw it out and just announce it, okay, Rebecca? I'll stand here and
Oh, you
pretend
just
I've
look
got
pretty.
something to do. Paul, you won. Well done, Paul. Paul from Quest Cannon Hill. Thank you, Paul.
All right, I'll sit down now.
The numbers picking up, Paul.
They are,
They are.
Yep, very slowly, but steadily.
Very good. You haven't had a number of bookings from Victoria or anything like that?
No.
Excellent. Also from Brendan of the Combsley Hotel, we have another $50 gift voucher. Thanks very much, Brendan, for blue ticket A8. Oh, well done, Taylor. Well done.
It's Tony.
I'll take it. Oh, good.
Yeah. Maybe a little less self-absorption, thank you, Shane. All right. Courtesy of Craig McCallum. Who's that? Oh, Craig. Noble Services, Pest Management and Carpet Cleaning. Thanks very much, Craig. A bottle of champagne, just in case we go back into lockdown and you need something to consume on the way. It's blue ticket A3.
Yeah.
Well done. As you know, a lot of businesses have suffered during the lockdown. Information available to me is that Dan Murphy's was not one of those businesses that suffered. I do think it was funny on election day, council election day, I went in to vote late on a Saturday afternoon, and apart from the Electoral Commission staff, there was only one other person in the voting booth. I then went from there to Dan Murphy's, and there were two people in the car park regulating the flow of cars. All right, Brendan from the Combsley, we've got another $50 gift voucher. Thank you, Craig. Orange ticket C100.
Oh, so close. I think I've won again.
Oh, well done.
So this one's for Judith. Judith will have this one.
If anybody's having trouble getting onto White Ladies this afternoon,
You know where we'll be.
just pop on down to the Combsley.
I think it was a gift voucher.
Yeah, it was. Yep.
Pop on down to the Combsley where they'll be discussing their cultural values.
You can take the team out.
And finally, courtesy of the Indigenous Youth Mobility Pathway, Jason Gardner, a black NFP compendium, orange ticket C88.
Bingo.
Aye, aye.
And you might be able to take this to all the
Oh, that is it. next month, folks. We've got a bit of a theme running at the moment throughout through the chamber presentation, and it's called the Tony theme. So, having had Tony Watt here today, we have Tony Ryan next month, and Tony Ryan is an education futurist who will present opportunity knocks, possibilities and provocations for the business beyond 2020. That sounds like it should be an evening function, that one, doesn't it? So folks, would be great to see you again. Fingers crossed that there's no reason we need to go backwards or anything like that. We don't want to go back to too many Zooms, I don't think. Thank you for coming today. Just a reminder, if you don't drop your name tag off, we will track you down viciously. Thanks for coming. Enjoy the rest of your week.